Welcome to Against the Verdict, Episode 1. And today we will be talking about Timothy Brian Cole. There are stories that break your heart, and then there are stories that indict the whole system. This is both. This is the story of Tim Cole, a U.S. Army veteran, college student, a son, a brother who lost 14 years of his life to a crime he did not commit and died in prison, still standing on business, still standing on his truth. And what makes this story even harder is that the person who could have cleared it up, the actual guy who did it, he tried to confess before Tim passed away over and over starting in 1995. So how does stuff like this happen? How does mistaken identification turn into a conviction and then into a death sentence by time? Well, let's start at the beginning. Timothy Brian Cole was born July 1st, 1960 in Brenham, Texas. He would then go on to serve in the U.S. Army and later attended Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas. But Tim also carries something serious, severe asthma. And this matters because with this case, the tiny details become the difference between a cage and freedom. People who knew Tim described him as proud, stubborn in a good way, steady. Someone who will look at you and say, I didn't do it, and he will mean it with the utmost 100% integrity. He had a life, plans, and a future. But then came March of 1985. On March 24th, 1985, a Texas Tech student named Michelle Malin parked her car across from her dormitory. A man would then approach her, and according to her, a black man, of course, because we know how that goes, allegedly threatened her with a knife and forced his way into her car, drove her to another location, and allegedly sexually assaulted her. But this attack didn't happen in a vacuum. There were other similar assaults in the area at the time, and fear was high. Everybody was on alert. And as you know, back then, when stuff like this happened, somebody got to pay. They wanted to catch this alleged perpetrator, and they wanted him last month. And with climates like that, investigations can get shady. Investigations can subtly shy away from the truth, as we all know. Here is one of the most haunting details in this entire story. Tim Cole became a target as the alleged perpetrator in part because he spoke to an undercover officer who was posing as a student as part of the effort to catch the rapist. Tim reportedly asked her out, and in the atmosphere of a serial rape investigation, that interaction got interpreted as a suspicious lens, and that's really messed up because he's asking her to go out, basically spitting game at her, and the undercover officer perceived that to be, oh, this man must be onto something. All right? This is why you have to be careful with who you talk to nowadays, read their energy, and especially as a black man. This is why when I deal with people, when I'm out and about, you come talk to me. I'm not going up to anybody. Anyway, continue. Then came the identification process, and police showed Malin photographs. What she would do is lie and select Tim's photograph. Later, she selected him again in a live lineup, in which a lot of people call an identity parade. But there is one thing about eyewitness identification. It can feel absolutely certain to the person making it and still be wrong. One of the witnesses picks someone the first time. The system often reinforces that choice until, quote unquote, I think it's him. And then that turns into, oh, I ain't positive. That's not an excuse. That's a warning. That's a warning to how things are and how, you have to be smart with how you move because anybody can get caught up in one of these lineups, especially a black man. In 1986, a jury convicted Tim Cole based on the testimony of this lying ass bitch. There are details and disputes about evidence handling and investigative quality, but the big picture is consistent across accounts. There was no physical evidence definitely tied to Tim that tied Tim to the assault, yet the identification was all they needed. Now here's the detail that should have hit the brakes immediately. Michelle Malin, with her lying ass, told the police that the alleged rapist smoked during the assault. But Tim Cole, as we said earlier, did not smoke. He had severe asthma. So let alone shows you how quote unquote great this investigation was. Now, that doesn't automatically prove innocence by itself because people can be wrong about details, but it was a serious red flag, a huge flag, the kind that you're supposed to investigate and not shrug off. Tim, from day one, maintained he was innocent. And that decision, holding the line, came with a price. While incarcerated, Tim was offered parole on the condition that he admit guilt. And what he did was that he stood on business. He said, fuck no. He would not trade a lie to see the sunshine, to breathe fresh, free air, to experience freedom. Stood on business, rather stay in his cell than admit to something he did not do. That choice is almost impossible to explain to people who've never had to face situations like this. I mean, imagine being told, hey, you can go home, just say you did it, and you know you didn't do it. For some people, survival means saying whatever works. For Tim, survival meant telling the truth even if it caused him further harm. And the years kept on stacking. And then while Tim was alive, something happened that should have changed everything. Another man, Jerry Wayne Johnson, confessed multiple times to the assault, starting in 1995. He was already incarcerated for other rapes from 1985 and received a life sentence for those crimes. I mean, Jerry Wayne Johnson was on one. This dude was just raping everything. All right? Johnson's confessions, according to accounts, did not lead to Tim's freedom. And by the time the system was ready to seriously confront this error, Tim was running out of time. This is the part where people want to ask, how can the confession not matter? Let me tell you the answer. It can matter less than a closed case. Because reopening a conviction is not just paperwork. It's an admission that the system, the police, the prosecutor, the court got it wrong, which they get it wrong all the fucking time. And institutions often resist that like a body rejects disease. Like a body rejects foreign objects. Institutions do not like to be wrong, even though they're wrong all the time. And that's why in these days, institutional credibility is at an all-time low. Then, unfortunately, on December 2nd, 1999, Tim Cole passed away in custody while having an asthma attack at the young age of 39. Didn't even get to see 40. 39 years old, this man who was a veteran, college student studying business. Obviously, he had his head on straight. He had his head on straight way more than I did when I was 24 years old when this happened to him. 14 years inside, He passes away at 39 years old because he would not confess to something he didn't do. And passing away before the truth finally came out. I mean, if the story were in here, it would be already a tragedy. But it doesn't. Because Tim's family did not let it in there. And this is why it's important to have a good circle, whether it's family members or friends, people who will fight for you, no matter what the situation is. Because what happens next shows the power of a good circle that's going to stand up for your name. Tim's family would then push to clear his name. And then peep this. Over time, the lying-ass bitch, Michelle Malin, the quote-unquote victim, came to believe she was mistaken and she joined the effort to correct what happened. And while it's noble for Michelle to come forward, it's too late, bitch. Should have did it earlier. And this is not to negate victims and what they're going through if she was actually raped. But it still has to be a level of truthfulness in these situations. A man lost his life for being at the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't feel for Michelle Malin because she could have got her justice by just not being so thirsty and telling the truth. So, even though she did come to help later on, we would give her a small piece of credit for that. So Malin actually met Tim's family, expressed regret, and became involved in reform advocacy, showing up, speaking, pushing for changes aimed at preventing others from living Tim's story. Again, we're going to give small credit where it's due, because this type of evolution is rare, and it is human. However, in my opinion, she is not off the hook for basically causing the death of an innocent black man. I will leave that up to you guys of your opinion about her coming, forward later. You decide if she deserves grace. Next is the DNA testing. In 2008, DNA testing excluded Tim Cole, and it would implicate Jerry Wayne Johnson. But, however, because the statute of limitations had passed, he was never charged with the crime or convicted. Now, in early February 2009, an exoneration hearing took place in Austin. A judge, Charlie Baird, announced with certainty that Tim Cole did not commit the rape, and the conviction was reversed with steps taken towards clearing the record. Think about what that means. The state finally said, officially, what Tim was saying all along. And Johnson, implicated by the DNA, confirmed he committed this assault and asked for forgiveness. But again, the statute of limitations were passed, and he could not be charged with that assault. So the justice here wasn't about punishing him again. It was about restoring Tim's name. And that restoration became historic. This became the first posthumous DNA exoneration in Texas. The conviction was overturned in 2009, with the case becoming recognized as Texas' first exoneration via DNA. But there was another fight. What about the pardon? Greg Abbott issued an opinion in January 2010 that cleared the path for a posthumous pardon. And on March 2nd, 2010, Rick Perry granted Texas' first posthumous pardon to Tim Cole. This wasn't just symbolic. In a state that cares deeply about conviction finality, the pardon was a public admission. We took the wrong guy. But Tim's story didn't stop at the cleared record. It changed the law in Texas. In 2009, legislation known as the Tim Cole Act increased compensation for people wrongfully convicted, commonly described as $80,000 per year of wrongful incarceration, plus other support like tuition provisions. And reforms didn't stop at compensation. The law also helped drive institutional learning, like the creation of the Timothy Cole Advisory Panel on wrongful convictions. This panel is tasked with studying cases of wrongful convictions and recommending prevention strategies. Now, if you zoom out, you see the bigger thing. Tim Cole's case highlights how fragile eyewitness identification can be and how pressure can distort investigations, how a closed case can become more important than a correct one. And this is why his name attached to reform efforts, because this story made it impossible to pretend that the problem was theoretical. In 2015, Texas also enacted the Tim Cole Exoneration Review Commission, created to review exonerations and recommend improvements to the legislator. And so this is a long journey. From a 1985 assault, a 1986 conviction, to a 1999 death, and to DNA truth in 2008, to exoneration and a pardon, all the way to formal reform in this infrastructure. While this does not bring Tim back, hopefully it can stop the next Tim from happening. A good name is more desirable than great riches. Proverbs 22. Tim Cole's story forces a hard question. How many people are sitting in prison right now offered the same bargain? Confess or stay. While the truth is somewhere outside of those cold walls. And it forces another question. What do we do when we learn that we got it wrong? No, we're not we. Let me say them. I'm not a part of that monster of a system. Because Michelle Malin didn't just survive what allegedly happened to her. She did later stand by the family of a man wrongfully convicted in her case, helping pushing the truth into daylight, which she does get small credit for. Tim's family, his people, they didn't just sit around and grieve. They got up and they fought for what was right. They insisted his name mattered, and it did. They proved that the truth can be delayed, but it doesn't have to be buried. Tim Cole died on December 2nd, 1999. But even though it took years later, the record caught up to reality. This story isn't only about injustice, it is also about accountability, about repair, about what is the cost of getting it wrong, measured in birthdays missed, decades stolen, and a man who never got to experience real freedom. So if you can take anything from this, take this. A system that cannot admit error is a system built to repeat it. Tim Cole deserved better. He deserved more. He deserved to experience a life of freedom. He deserved to experience finishing his college education and going on to do what he could have potentially done. We don't know. And the rest of us, if we're being honest, we deserve a justice system that can look at the truth and not flinch, Thank you. This is Against the Verdict, episode 1.